Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and we're here for a session all about avoiding the good enough trap with Dynamics 365 ERP solutions. Our presenter today is Brian Maxin of Journyx. It's great to have him with us. And as we begin, please do know we do welcome your questions. Look for the questions section of the webcast interface. You can enter them really at any point. We will be taking those offline, but we will be capturing them as we go. So please do feel free to use that. So without any further delay, I think we're ready to begin. I'm going to hand things off to Brian.
All right, awesome. I appreciate the introduction. And hey guys, my name is Brian Maxin. I am the Director of Sales over at Journyx. We've been around for about 24 years, been here for about 19 of those, so a long time. Yeah, I want to talk to you guys through sort of the whole moving to Dynamics 365 ERP and really try to, as the title says, how to avoid the sort of good enough trap and give you some things to think about that. So again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot them through during the presentation, and we can get those questions addressed for you. So obviously Microsoft is putting the big push there to get everything in the cloud. Azure and D365, Business Central and FinOps. So well, many of you, I'm sure, are out there using a more client version of that, whether it be Dynamics GP or Nav. You're probably at least considering making that transition over to D365, either for Business Central or FinOps. Obviously, this is a very important decision, and it could be for more reasons such as moving your company's applications to the cloud. Maybe it's switching your license model to more of a subscription cloud-based license model, or maybe you just want to move to a more modern platform. Maybe move away from an on-premise client version to having something in Azure. So I'm sure as you guys realize, this isn't a decision that should be made lightly, or by any means in a quick fashion. With any significant organizational change like this, there are really significant investments to not only your actual costs, what you're spending for the software, but certainly, your team's time, your resources time, and effort to implement and adopt the new solution when it's something that is critical as your back-end ERP and potentially payroll software. So, when you're moving organizations to something like this, organizations typically use their ERP solution to measure costs on projects, obviously invoice customers for services that you're delivering, maybe fulfill any HR related requirements, such as paying employees or managing time off. Obviously these are very crucial functions, and I think we can all agree that your company can't really afford to have the wrong system or processes in place when it comes to time to process payroll, generating invoices, right? Those are very critical portions to any organization. So as we're trying to consider all of those things, there really is a cost of not thinking ahead. And we've kind of broken this down into a couple of items for you guys to consider. And so what you don't think about really could hurt you later. And some of those things to think about is, first of all, training, right? So training for yourself, your administrators, your team, maybe even your end users, if you're talking about doing time and expense entry as it's related to doing that cost accounting, billing, and payroll purpose. So training is certainly one of those things to take into consideration. Second item we would think about is, how do I transfer and map all that data, right? So if you're trying to take your ERP solution from an on-premise client version of Nav into Business Central, what does that data mapping look like? What does that migration process look like? That's certainly something that's very important to consider as well. Do I have any tools, modules, add-ons that I need to migrate? So in addition to like time and expense, are you using anything that's connecting like E1 or BI 360, any of the other ISV solutions out there that might be connected on or bolted on to your client nav? What are you going to do as consideration with moving those guys to Business Central? Are all those ISVs supported with Business Central? Things like that to consider. Do you have integration with other applications? So if you are collecting time and expense data in your current version of Dynamics, does moving to Business Central or FinOps, is that process going to support exporting to a third-party payroll solution, for example, to a Microsoft project, to Power BI, any other integrations with other applications? That's something else that you really want to take into consideration also. So really not planning your implementation with these and any other aspects in mind could certainly delay or extend that process or that project unnecessarily. Certainly could cause confusion with employees, or certainly absolutely could cause something to break. As we discussed previously, the last thing we want to do is to break one of these critical business processes like cost accounting, client billing, or payroll. Really, if you think about it, with cost accounting, invoicing, and payroll, making any errors in this process, it could cost you thousands, potentially billions, I mean, not billions, millions, if you're talking about, especially invoicing, payroll fines, things like that. So thinking about what would happen with payroll, PTO, or invoices that aren't calculated correctly could cause you a lot of trouble and really cost you a lot of money. So, a nice little analogy here is horseshoes, right? So just good enough, close enough really doesn't count. So as you guys are upgrading your ERPs to D365, you'll have a lot of options available to you for various finance, accounting, and HR functions. As the saying goes, only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, and good enough is really not a trap that you want to fall into when it comes to choosing how you want to handle those functions that we just discussed. One of the really critical and important functions that really drives cost accounting, drives client invoicing, and really drives payroll and time off tracking is time entry. And so when we're talking about your time entry options as it relates to upgrading to Business Central or FinOps, you really have a few options, right? One of those options is, well, let's consider using the time entry modules that are already built into D365, right? Certainly, Business Central and FinOps has a per user license, a self-service license that you could use to track time and expense data with some of the native options. A second option might be to use a third-party option that is sort of a bolt-on and works natively within D365. So maybe something that you might find out there on the app source that you could sort of bolt on and use to be able to collect your time that way. Third way is the good old homegrown system. Maybe it's something that you've been using for a really long time. Maybe it's something that you're wanting to engage with your VAR to maybe build a homegrown solution for you. We kind of all know the pros and cons probably of a homegrown application, but it's something that would certainly be an option. And of course, you have something like Journyx, which would be a third-party ISV that is a cloud solution that can easily integrate with D365 for time entry. So the option you choose really depends on your specific needs. It can be tempting to use the first option because in theory, it would seem on the surface to be less expensive, though the way that they're kind of pricing out the self-service user license at this point really isn't a lot less expensive than some of the third-party solutions like Journyx from a license standpoint. But even if it on the surface, if it seems less expensive, and you might be able to house everything in quote unquote one place, um, is the answer on that it does things just good enough, time tracking, or does it really give you what you need as an organization to try the business value that you need out of time tracking for that cost accounting, billing, and payroll? So in the long run, if the built-in solution, the third-party add-on, or the homegrown application, while seeming cheaper and potentially being more sort of built in, if that's not going to solve that business problem for you guys long term, in the long run, it really ends up costing you more because you have to do a lot of fixing of bad data. You have to maybe potentially replace that solution with a better solution down the road. And again, having to start from scratch with a new tool is really not the long-term solution. So if you want to really just look at an example of what a third-party, time and expense tracking solution like Journyx might be able to offer in comparison to some of those other options, I don't want to read through these line by line for you, but at a higher level, at least, a third-party solution like Journyx is going to give you the ability to track, both your project and HR-related time in one place. You can track your time and expense data all in the same place without having to log in as multiple logins. It's got a sort of a crew-based entry for sort of your field services or type organizations where you've got managers that need to enter time on behalf of others and groups. You have the ability to manage time off and leave requests, leave balance validation, holiday schedules, all within Journyx or a third-party tool. Um, a lot of times, some of the native Dynamics solutions don't support all of the payroll solutions, even within the Dynamics suite, like Canadian payroll, as an example, for any of our Canadian folks out there. But also supporting other third-party payroll solutions like ADP, Paychecks. A lot of those homegrown or bolt-ons don't integrate with some of those third-party solutions. Equipment tracking. Some of the native options do a lot better job now having a mobile app, but it's not always very intuitive. It doesn't allow you to capture all of that data through the mobile app like a good third-party tool would be that's focused on doing this. Certainly resource management, being able to optimize your resources across projects, integrate with other things like Microsoft Exchange, Microsoft Project, and then certainly being able to sync between the D365 solutions, at least as it relates to like a homegrown system. Obviously, the native solutions will probably app source, bolt-on solutions will be able to integrate with Dynamics. But when we're talking about homegrown solutions, that certainly probably might not be an option unless you're having to customize that. So, just looking at ways that a third-party application again can help you with these things. One of those options is a very clean, more user-friendly interface for entering in time and expenses. As it relates to time and expense tracking, I'm sure you guys all know that nobody likes to do this stuff. So the easier we can make this for people, the more accurate your time entry is going to be, the more timely they're going to submit that for approval. The more accurate that it is, the less fixing of bad data that your administrators have to do. So, a lot of the native options within Dynamics, while it's available, doesn't always have the most user-friendly interface. And so having that option is really going to improve the accuracy of the data that's flowing back into D365. Having approval, flexible multi-level approval workflow processes is something else that's very important. So a lot of the native options, bolt-on options, homegrown options are not going to have the flexibility that you guys need to be able to review and approve that time in a timely fashion, both at a sheet level, with multiple levels, primary and alternate approvers, being able to approve time at both the sheet level and also at a project level. a lot of that's going to be lacking in some of these native bolt-on and homegrown options, where those are all part of the core solution within a third-party solution like Journyx. And then really just a lot of the native reporting that's available, dashboard reporting, flexible reporting directly natively within a third-party solution like Journyx, but also being able to very simply integrate with API connections to Excel, to Power BI, to BI 360 is really going to give you guys the ability to analyze that data without having to do a lot of outside consulting to be able to connect a lot of these different native bolt-on and homegrown solutions with those reporting features. You're also going to get a much cleaner user experience with a mobile app in a third-party solution like Journyx. Since time and expense tracking is what a lot of times these third-party parties solutions already focus on, the user experience for both the web and the mobile app is something that we look to optimize. So the ability to capture time and expense data through a mobile app, both project time, time off, expense data for both iOS and Android, being able to submit that for approval through a mobile app, being able to attach receipt images for expense tracking, and then also having the ability to review and approve that time and expense data through the mobile app is something that's going to be really critical to helping ensure, again, that your data is accurate and that it's being submitted in a timely fashion. So really, in summary, around some of the benefits of using a third-party time tracking solution like Journyx, you're going to have an easier time entry user experience, so it's going to lead to more accurate time data and really reduce the amount of corrections that you have to do on the back end. Employees are going to be able to enter time and expense data from anywhere, from any device, all in one place. So you've got your project time, your time off, your expense data, web, mobile, so real time, anywhere, any place, and all in one solution. You're going to have really a lot more robust functionality than you're going to have in a lot of these native bolt-on or homegrown solutions, like being able to validate the accuracy of the data being entered into the system, overtime calculations for payroll. You'll be able to do all of that functionality within a third-party tool like Journyx as compared to some of the other options. And then you're really just going to spend a lot less time processing timesheets. So collecting missing timesheets, fixing broken data, feeding that data into Business Central or FinOps. That process is going to be so much smoother, so much less time intensive, and it's really going to save you a lot of time and money in the long run. Just to back that up a little bit, I got a couple of examples of some of our Dynamics customers. Iridium Satellites, a very large satellite producer. They were on or are on GP natively. And where I think they're relevant is they actually used to be on a version of GP where good old Business Central was the way for collecting time and expense. So obviously when Microsoft stopped supporting Business Portal as a way for entering time and expense, when they upgraded to GP, a newer version of GP, they had to find a better solution, right? So they moved over to, instead of moving over to the self-service native options for time and expense tracking, they moved over to Journyx because Journyx was very flexible. It did have multi-level approval workflow processes. It was very tightly integrated with GP. A lot of the things that we talked about just now, some of the benefits that you receive from moving to a third-party reporting solution like Journyx, they were able to experience as compared to their evaluation of the native time tracking options with GP. So that's going to be very relevant. Same thing, if you're moving from client version of GP or Nav, moving to Business Central or FinOps, really those same native options are going to be the same ones that are available with Business Central or FinOps. It's just going to be in the cloud. Same thing with Align Communications. They were a nav customer. So same kind of consideration. The native options, the user interface wasn't very intuitive. Doing time and expenses were very painful and time consuming for the users. So same thing, pointing back to data accuracy, pointing back to submitting time and expense data in a timely fashion. You can see here the code here. With using Journyx, less time was spent getting through the month and the cycle. What used to take 5 to 10 business days, it now takes 3 to 7 business days. So they're a lot more confident that the hours aren't being missed, that the data is accurate, and it's flowing back into their nav system in a timely fashion. So in sort of recap there, as you guys are considering moving from native client versions of GP or Nav into the cloud for Business Central and FinOps, the good enough trap really isn't good enough, right? You don't want to sacrifice any of the critical business processes that you have around measuring your cost on projects, invoicing your customers, paying your employees, tracking time off, because of the native options for tracking that data or the bolt-on or homegrown systems seem to be less expensive, seem to be good enough, because in the long run, it really isn't. It's going to end up costing you more money in the long run when you have to either deal with fixing bad data, missing billing, fixing payroll issues, and having to scrap or replace those initial options with a third-party solution like Journyx. If you guys do have additional questions, again, I think Jason mentioned that you can put those into the question section of the GoTo webinar. We're happy to address those questions as they come. You can also always feel free to contact Journyx directly at the number and email address there on the right side of the panel. If you do want to learn more about Journyx for Dynamics, you can also visit our website at journyx.com/dynamics. And with that being said, I think I can turn it back over to Jason to see if there's any sort of closing remarks on the presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Brian. As you were saying, yeah, but please do enter any questions that you have, or obviously feel free to reach out to the Journyx team. They will, of course, get back to you. With that, we are ready to conclude today's event. Brian, thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate the time.
All right, and with that, we will conclude today's event. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thanks, guys.